Jackie, your federation has been very involved in and made a priority to fight hate. What does that look like, and how did you and your federation get involved in this work?
This, I really have to think back to first, just for those who don't know what a JCRC is, I think I probably should just start there. So I direct basically community relations for the Jewish community at the intersection of all other communities in our city in Cincinnati. In Cincinnati, that module looks like a part of Federation. In other cities, it's separate from Federation. It's a different 501c3. But we all operate with the same goal of really the mission, under the mission of ensuring Jewish security, recognizing that Jewish security depends on a just society for all people. And for me, sort of the essence of that mission is really how I feel rooted in my own Jewish identity. So for me, it really feels like the most Jewish thing I can do is to be invested in the security and justice, causes of justice where that's compromised, because we really are all in this together. And I think what is so powerful about what Eric shares and sort of his thinking on this is that this is not a kumbaya, you come to my vigil, I'll come to your vigil kind of allyship. This is a really a much more foundational, self-interested, my liberation is wrapped up in yours. So I'm here because I care about you and because it's the right thing to do, but because I see myself in your oppression. And we're trying to figure out how to make those sort of visceral, very what's the word I'm looking for? Consequential connections across communities, both to help the Jewish community understand that allyship, and why it's important to be there in the space of marginalization in other communities and vice versa. So I'll speak just a little bit. I don't want to repeat too much of what Eric shared, but I first met Eric over the phone after Charlottesville. So we were watching what was happening in Charlottesville. And if you remember, there was reporting in Charlottesville about what they were saying, and it was like, you will not replace us. And then it was like, oh, are they saying Jews? And then some people were like, no, they weren't saying Jews. What do Jews have to do with this? Jews are white. Which we know is clearly not an accurate picture of the Jewish community. But this is, there was all of this like confusion about the narrative coming out of Charlottesville. There was confusion in the Jewish community who couldn't articulate this. Like, I had JCRC board members who, when asked by their Black colleagues, like, why were they talking about Jews? They would say, oh, it's because Jews killed Christ or something like that. I mean, they just had no way to articulate what Eric just said, which is that they were talking about Jews because anti-Semitism forms the core of white nationalism. It's the core belief in the ideology. And we have been, I think, privileged in America as Jews up until now to not really have to understand that, to not have to understand that ourselves, to not have to be able to have the vocabulary and the language to talk to others about that. But we've reached a period where we can't rest on that any longer. And so I was sensing, again, both in our Jewish community, but in the broader community, that there was a real need to educate around this. We also had a newspaper article come out at the time that was a big expose, kind of hitting on the trends in Charlottesville, localizing that. Our newspaper went and sort of tried to do an expose on a hate group in southeastern Indiana, which is pretty close to Cincinnati. And the framing of the whole piece was about race, which is a huge, very important piece of this. What was completely missing from the conversation, and unfortunately I knew it wasn't just in the coverage, it was also in Jewish reporters who worked at the station who told me that they were asked to cover this as opposed to sending a colleague of theirs who was Black or Muslim, because like we couldn't send them, but it was okay to send you. So there was a lack of consciousness in the newsroom, in the stories that were being told about what was happening with this hate group, about the role that anti-Semitism plays, about the fact that Jews are marginalized in this movement. And not just because we insist that we need our oppression to be known, but what Eric shared, that if we're missing the core piece, if we're missing that foundation, then how much success are we going to stand having in actually dealing with the movement? So Eric generously dropped what he was doing immediately in Portland, and came to Cincinnati and spent some time with us, talking to other community leaders, talking to the newspaper staff, about what he just shared with you, and how he kind of came to that understanding. And it was transformative. It really catalyzed the way we thought about how we talk about anti-Semitism, what's missing in our own community in terms of our own awareness of what anti-Semitism is, what we need to be better versed in ourselves, and also how we build, informed, self-interested allies in the broader community, who aren't just out there saying it's nice to be nice to the Jewish community, but who say we see our, to use Eric's words, our skin in this game. This is our problem. And frankly, I think, we Jews have to ask ourselves the same question about race and how we find our own skin in the game as it relates to the struggles and the racial justice cause in this moment. Not just because we have clearly a substantial part of our community that identifies as Jews of color or Black Jews, but also because, what does it mean for our security as Jewish people? And, to use Eric's point, in terms of what racism does to inclusive democracy, but also, the fact that, take the newspaper, for example, the fact that everything in this country, because this country was built to be this way, to operate on the basis of black and white first, right? That's the way this country was built. It was intentionally designed. Where does that leave Jews in that mix, with an identity that is far more complicated than saying you're marginalized or you're not based on the color of your skin? We have a far more complicated identity of minority and majority. So I think that actually it works the other way too. We need to do more work in our Jewish community to help engender self-interested allyship in the cause of racial justice and other causes. I'll stop there.
You actually, before we go back to Eric, can you just talk a little bit about the conference that you had in Cincinnati and how you kind of went about bringing people together around that?
Sure. So when Eric joined us for that first sort of trip, when he was speaking with community leaders, the way people animated to what he was saying. I mean, literally the physical reaction of people in the audience, the epiphanies that were happening, you could see it, you could hear it through the room of, oh, that's what the Jews will not replace us language was all about. Or that's why they had swastikas on. Or that's why, there was this feeling of Hitler-esque things happening. It was so palatable, and it was such a different response than anything I had ever received in talking about anti-Semitism in front of diverse audiences, that I thought, we are missing an opportunity here to build allies who can speak with this kind of resonance and to equip them. And we're missing a key intersectional conversation across our community about this. So fast forward, unfortunately, Pittsburgh happened, and there were a lot of communities that reached out to us and said, what can we do to support you? I mean, here we are, we're at your vigil, what can we do to help? And so we really seized the moment and said, what if we put together a day-long learning opportunity summit on anti-Semitism and hate that really was dedicated at exploring these intersections, that was really for, a select group. We had 300 seats of community leaders across sectors and across diverse politics and affiliations, to come together and to start to build this kind of capacity in our community for diverse understanding of this. And Eric, again, dropped what he was doing and came to join us. You see the theme here. and he spoke along with Deborah Lipstadt. We had breakout groups throughout the day that explored different aspects of this, from, protecting vulnerable communities and sort of the security pieces, some of what Oren just shared with you, to, what's happening on campuses, to the balance between hate speech and free speech, to the way this is covered in the news media. We had, our local media featured, And we had a really, we led people through kind of a journey of understanding the way these things intersect. And what we found is that it was transformative for people. I mean, even just in one day, people came away with different impressions, different understandings, a more sort of a deeper dive on what I think people too often write off as like surface level cultural competency or like implicit bias. And people felt like they wanted more, like they were more invested. So yeah, so we kind of have been trying to follow in that legacy at our JCRC of being the convener for conversation about anti-hate work. That's not just about Jewish advocacy. That's really about the advocacy and support of democratic values, democratic practice, and to counter extremism, which is a much broader topic. Every time I hear, I mean, I know I'm speaking for everybody on this call, but every time I hear Eric speak, I'm like newly empowered in the advocacy work that I do. And I think that there's a unique opportunity for us as Jews to hear from someone who's not Jewish to say, if you don't stand up for this, if you don't insist on this, who's going to? And there's so much at stake for the rest of us. So I just want everyone to leave with that impression. In terms of what you all can do, listen, you know, I hate to say this is on you because it's not. We all have to do our part. But when we think about the largest civil rights uprising movement since the 60s, sort of encapsulated by the Black Lives Matter movement, we know it's a decentralized movement. Guess what? That means that federations, all Jewish alphabet soup of like structured engagement isn't going to work. So that means all of you as organic, decentralized centers of Jewishness and of Jewish advocacy have to go at this. You've got to go at it in relationship. You've got to go at it in personal engagement. So we're here to support you, but we're also asking for each of you to lead this, to own it and to lead it. And I also think that, you know, the other piece that's so fundamental about the moment that we're in, and Eric spoke to this also, is, you know, what can you do about you know, the anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism piece on campus? I think all of this actually stems from a mob think mentality that's lacking in nuance. We have to change the way we think about things. We have to start, you know, I've started to say, like, make nuance and space for conversation something that's like popular and attractive again. I was really torn, and I'll leave it at this. When I was offered this job about taking it, I had it was right at the heels of it was right after the 2016 election. I was torn about the place in my own life and where I felt I needed to do my own work in support of the values I hold dear. And I was concerned that this was going to, in some way, could tie my hands, or, you know, but what I've learned is that actually sustainable change happens in the middle. And so we have to galvanize. We need people pushing the envelope, and we need people who can say, everyone come with us, or we lose the ground. So I think that if you all can be those bold ambassadors for that sort of bell curve, and if you can do the work in your own circles, if you're in a conservative circle, plenty of work to do. If you're in a liberal circle, plenty of work to do. So look around you and see what the work is to do. Don't be afraid to be the individual relationship builders and the pioneers in relationship for the Jewish community. That's what we need right now. This is not going to happen at the top tiers. This is going to happen from the bottom up. So I'm just grateful for the conversation and the time, and always to be in the same place as Eric and Stephanie and Darcy and all of my friends on this call.
Thank you so much. And I think I can speak for all of us, Jackie, that we're really glad you took the job. So good decision.
Yes, we are.
Thank you so much, Eric, Stephanie, Jackie. This was an incredible conversation, just what we needed to hear. Not long enough, but we had to work within the time limitations that we had, and we accomplished so much. So thank you. To the fellows that want to continue this conversation, I encourage you to join the elective this afternoon on anti-Semitism and other oppressions. I'd also encourage folks to attend the gun violence and the peace building session, or attend one and watch another one later. But thank you all again for joining us, and have a good afternoon and evening.